So, not to toot my own horn here or anything, but I'm kind of an Animal Crossing expert. Come on, ask me any question. I bet I'll get it right. Who created Animal Crossing? Mr. Gucci, of course. How many villagers are in New Leaf? 333. Dude, come on, everyone knows that. What system was the first game released on? Dude, you gotta come up with better questions than this. It was the GameCube. Wait, what the fuck? For a lot of us, we first played Animal Crossing on the GameCube back in 2002, but over in Japan, they got the game a year before we did on a completely different system, the N64. When I first found out about this, it blew my mind. Animal Crossing was originally an N64 game? What, next you're gonna tell me Breath of the Wild was originally a Wii U game? Don't be ridiculous. Now, I guess this isn't the most surprising thing in the world. I mean, the original Animal Crossing was never going to win any awards in the graphics department, and if you told someone who didn't know what Animal Crossing was that this was an N64 game, they'd probably believe you. What is surprising about this, though, is the N64 version of Animal Crossing released just a few months before the GameCube launched in Japan. Then 3 months later, they went and ported it to the GameCube anyways. Like, what was even the point of putting it on the N64 in the first place? Then, 2 years after that, they released it again on the GameCube and added a bunch of features that never made it to the Western release. That's like 3 versions of the same game. Way to pull a Capcom, Nintendo. But these Japanese versions of Animal Crossing have always fascinated me. Like, for example, with the N64 version, the system didn't have an internal clock, so how'd they do the whole time passes in the game even when you're not playing thing? And I mean, just how different are these versions? Well, thanks to some pretty dedicated fans, we now have English translations for these games, which means we can finally try them out for ourselves. So why don't we do that? You know, could be fun. So I guess we should start with the N64 version, which released on April 14th, 2001 under the name Dobutsu no Mori. It was actually the last first-party title to be released on the system. And now, the game was originally a 64DD game and was going to make use of the 64DD's internal clock. But when they were forced to scrap this version and turn it into a normal cartridge release, they had to get a bit more creative since, like I said before, the N64 doesn't have an internal clock. So they just kind of shoved a clock inside the cartridge and called it a day. I mean, sure, yeah, that works. Now, when we first start up the game, we're greeted by the N64 logo before being thrown into a pretty familiar looking title screen. Yeah, besides the obvious logo change, the title screen is basically the same as the Western release, even down to the villager rudely pushing Bob out of the way. You son of a bitch. One thing you'll probably notice right away, though, is the resolution, because, yeah, it's not looking too great, especially when you compare it to the GameCube release. That's because while the GameCube displays games in 480p, the N64 could only do 240p with most games. However, if you're one of those big boy gamers and had the expansion pack, the game would actually upscale to 480. Neat. So we talk to KK, get on the train, and everything seems mostly unchanged. Then we get to this. Nintendo, what the hell is this? Instead of using a keyboard, you use like a rotary phone system to input text. Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking. Maybe this kind of system is more common in Japan due to how their alphabet works. Who knows? But as we make our way through the opening segment of the game, we get to see some of the more drastic differences. Like, there's no mayor. Yeah, Tortimer's just gone. He wouldn't be introduced until Dobutsu no Mori Plus on the GameCube, where he sported a slightly different design. Also, since Tortimer isn't here, all of the special items he usually gives you aren't here either. So, if there's no mayor, who does Nook ask you to introduce yourself to at the beginning of the game? Well, besides all of the villagers, no one. He just asks you to stop by the village shrine on your way back. Yeah, instead of a wishing well, there's a traditional Japanese shrine in this version. And I absolutely love the way this looks. You can even ring the shrine bell on New Year's, which is a really nice touch. Moving right along though, after a few minutes, I started to notice the village felt a bit more barren than I remember it feeling on the Gamecube, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Then it hit me. There's no Able Sisters! Yeah, the Able Sisters in their shop are nowhere to be found, which means you can't design your own clothes. This change was probably the one that felt the weirdest to me. Making your own clothes has always felt like such a staple to the series, like you can't have Animal Crossing without it. This means you're limited to whatever clothes Nook decides to sell at his shop, which isn't the worst thing, I guess. There's actually some clothes that are exclusive to this version of the game, like instead of a GameCube logo shirt, there's an N64 shirt. Also, I didn't even notice this until I eventually dug up a fossil, but there's no museum either, which means no blathers. You can still send fossils off to the faraway museum to be identified, but once you get them back, you can only either display them in your home or sell them. The same goes for bugs and fish. Another omission is one that isn't all too surprising. Captain isn't here, which means there's no island to visit. Which, like I said, is to be expected since Captain and the island could only be accessed in the GameCube version using the GBA link cable. Which, let's be honest, this thing was basically DLC for Animal Crossing. Other small differences include some buildings and NPCs having slightly different designs. During Cherry Blossom season, villagers will sit on mats, which is adorable. Blanca isn't here due to the custom design system being absent, and some of KK's songs were changed, like DJ KK, which used a guitar riff that sounded eerily similar to the song Get Ready for This. Honestly, the N64 version is mostly just a watered-down version of Animal Crossing. But like I said before, 8 months after this version released on the N64, they'd port it to the GameCube as Dobutsu no Mori Plus. This version added a bunch of Animal Crossing staples, like the museum, the Able Sisters, basements and second floors for your house, Tortimer, and the island. This was the version that Nintendo of America would eventually localize for the rest of the world. Except they changed and added quite a bit, like making the shrine a wishing well or adding a bunch of new holidays and events. Nintendo EAD was apparently so impressed with what Nintendo of America did that they retranslated this version back to Japanese, added a bunch of new features, and released it as Dobutsu no Mori E+. The E standing for e-reader, I guess. Which, the e-reader was this weird add-on for the GBA that was like a credit card reader for these cards that you could buy. Over in the West, it didn't really catch on, but it's a moderate amount of success in Japan. Now, Dobutsu no Mori E+ has a lot of exclusive features that weren't available in any other region outside of Japan. Some of these features would eventually be used in later titles though, like New Leaf. So I guess this version can kind of be considered the definitive edition of the original Animal Crossing. So what exactly did it add? Well, the biggest thing it added were town decorations. These were purchased from Tom Nook and could be placed around your town to spruce things up a bit. Now, if you've played New Leaf, you're probably freaking out right now because, yeah, this is basically an early version of the Public Works projects. However, town decorations are a little more interesting in my opinion. You see, in addition to the town decorations that Nook sells, you could actually go to a website called the Object Delivery Service to get even more town decorations. On this website, you choose the item you want and play a little mini game where you barter with Red to get the lowest price possible. You then choose where you want to place it, then Red would give you a code that could be used to purchase the item in game. I love this feature. It's such a cute way to add more content to the game in an age before DLC was a thing. Some of these town decorations would even return in New Leaf, like the flower clock. The Rossetti Center also makes its first appearance here, which is cool, I guess. Not sure why you'd want to visit Rossetti. He's kind of an asshole, but hey, at least you got the option. Interestingly, the island isn't locked behind the GBA link cable in this version, which is a very welcome change. You can unlock it after you completely pay off your home. After it's paid off, Nook will offer to sell you a private island, which sounds a bit similar to the concept of a certain other Animal Crossing game. There's a bunch of smaller additions as well, like more fish and bugs to catch, animals can get sick and will need medicine. There's even a feature that lets you save screenshots to an SD card using this adapter that fits into the Gamecube's memory card slot. A bunch of new villagers were added as well, some of which have never been seen outside of this game either. Also, there's this thing where you can wake Nook up in the middle of the night by literally banging your shovel against his door, which is like the best thing ever. Like, look at this sleepy boy. But yeah, there's just so much they added here, which is why it's a real shame that this version never made its way outside of Japan. This really is the definitive GameCube Animal Crossing experience. Yeah, while most of the big changes were eventually used in later installments, there's just something so fascinating about seeing them implemented here. In a lot of ways, this version made me feel like I was discovering a game from my childhood for the first time again, and that's something I don't get to experience very often. But what do you think of these Japanese exclusive Animal Crossing games? Are you disappointed that they never made it outside of Japan? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe and all that typical YouTuber outro stuff. Ring the bell. That's one that I usually don't say during these outros. but yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching.